Good evening, everyone. Welcome again to another live streaming of basic transfer pricing. No? And I would like to shout out po sa ating mga subscribers. Umabot na tayo ng ilan na hari? 668 no? Subscribers dito po sa ating basic transfer pricing. And yung pinili kong topic ngayon, yung talagang makakatulong lalo na dito sa requirement, no, sa bagong requirements ng BIR, which is the BIR Form 1709 as an attachment to the annual income tax return, which is the transfer pricing documentation for related parties. Our topic is about how to make transfer pricing policy and documentation. And ito pa yung na-discover ko na isang magandang case. Yung Pharma Distributor AS versus Eastern High Court of Denmark, no? Bakit? Ito yung timely sa ating discussion on documentation. Why? Kasi dito sa case na to, diniscuss dito how the transfer pricing documentation are being used, no, in court and also in tax audit. So we have a guide on what will happen next when we submit our transfer pricing documentation. But of course, before that, yung topic natin, before we will discuss the case, is how to make transfer pricing policy and documentation. So let us be guided by the requirement of the BIR. Ano yung requirement ng BIR? Dito sa Ramo 1-2019, meron ditong tinatawag din na transfer pricing documentation. Yung Ramo 1-2019, ito yung Revenue Audit Memorandum Order 1-2019 on transfer pricing audit. Okay. So let's take a look, no? Because during the audit, may mga sinasabi dito sa number 7, no, the transfer pricing documentation. And what are the transfer pricing documentations required during the transfer pricing audit under this Ramo 1-2019? Ang sabi dito sa transfer pricing documentation number 7, page 10 of the Ramo, the revenue officers should focus on the following activities in performing function assets and analysis, no, and risk. Sabi niya, identify the significant material economically relevant functions performed by the taxpayer, indicating design, processing, assembly, research and development, sale and distribution, purchase, provision of services, marketing, promotion, transportation, financing, and management, and other related activities. And ano pang sabi niya dito? Identify the significant functions performed based on the following: transfer pricing documentation. That's why our topic is how to make transfer pricing policy and documentation. No? Kasi during the audit, hindi talaga mawala yung transfer pricing documentation. And or FAR analysis form. Kailangan din sa transfer pricing documentation, the taxpayer's financial statements, the organizational chart, the questionnaire needed for interviews, kasama po siya sa tool dito sa audit. Review analysis of accounting data, interviews, plant tours, site visitations. No? Okay. So, maraming requirement dito sa transfer pricing documentation, but we should also visit the transfer pricing requirement ng OECD because sabi nga natin, yun po yung roots talaga o umpisa ng transfer pricing na documentation, which is also the basis ng mga tax authorities, no, in different parts of the world. So the transfer pricing documentation as required, or the guidance of the OECD guidance, is in Chapter 5 for the documentation requirements po. Also, itong Chapter 5 talks about the 3/3 requirements of OECD documentation. No? So when we say 3/3, these are the master file, the local file, and the country-by-country reporting. So if you try to look at the matrix or sample form ng mga documentation na yan, just like country-by-country report, the local file, and the master file, nandoon na naka-segmentize na yung information, no? Naka-breakdown na. So it's very easy for us to make a transfer pricing analysis. No? What are the objectives of this transfer pricing documentation? Bakit po siya nire-require? No? So we have to start with the requirement or the purpose, no, or the objective of the documentation, so that dyan naiikot yung ating documents, how we do it, no? Because when we try to do our transfer pricing documentation, it should answer the purpose for that documentation requirements. Okay, so the objectives of transfer pricing documentations are to ensure the taxpayers give appropriate consideration to transfer pricing requirements in establishing prices and other conditions for transactions between associated enterprises and in reporting the income derived from such transactions in their tax returns. No? So, ano sabi? Appropriate consideration to transfer pricing requirements, no? Especially in the establishment of prices. And second objective of the transfer pricing documentation is to provide tax administrations. Yung unang objective is for the taxpayer, yung second objective is for the tax administration or the tax authority. Provide tax administration with the information necessary to conduct an informed transfer pricing risk assessment. No? So they have to assess the taxpayer about the risk assessment, whether they have to the taxpayer will be subjected into a thorough audit. No? And number 3, to provide tax administration with useful information to employ in conducting an appropriately thorough audit of the transfer pricing practices of entities subject to tax in their jurisdiction, although it may be necessary to supplement the documentation with additional information as the audit progresses. Yun na yung sabi ko na hindi limited ang examiner during the transfer pricing audit kung ano lang yung nakalista, no, na general na mga documents required. Along the audit, if may findings, they can still ask for additional documents, especially if it is related to the findings. Kasi sabi na nga natin, every transfer pricing case is unique and factual, and it depends on the facts and circumstances of the case. That's why during the audit, even if we have a general guideline on what documents are to be presented, but since if there are findings during the audit, the examiner can still, or the tax officer can still request for any other kind of documents. No? So they are limited to those documents listed. Okay, so we have now discussed to you, I have discussed to you the transfer pricing documentation as required by the guidelines. No? Now let us discuss on how to make this transfer pricing documentation, because it's very, very easy to say na these are the requirements, but how do we prepare for those documentations? No? Okay. So, how to make transfer pricing policy and documentation. No? So, ano ba yung mga transfer pricing policy natin? So that, yun yung sabi ko na there was one CPA also who asked me na, Ma'am, ano gagawin namin? Ganito nangyari, ganito nangyari. So that is a management prerogative, sabi ko. So, Ma'am, anong gagawin namin dito? Of course, hindi ko masabi because I cannot advise right away without looking into the circumstances of the case at saka kung ano ba talaga nangyari. Alam nyo, if you are a tax consultant, huwag basta-basta magbigay ng opinion, no? Because you might be quoted. Doon ako umiiwas. Umaya i-quote nila na ako yung nagsabi, pero hindi na pag-aralan yung case. That's why ayoko yung nagko-comment, no? So, how to make the transfer pricing policy? Of course, our policy should always conform with the arm's length principle. And what is the arm's length principle of transfer pricing? It provides that the related party transactions should be at par or similar with that of the independent party transactions. Why? Because the benchmark or the true transaction is that of the independent party transactions, because the transactions is influenced by the market forces and not by the element of control as present in the related party transactions. No? So ano yung ating transfer pricing policy na gagawin? Dapat it should be compliant with the arm's length principle. And when we say arm's length principle, paano natin i-price yung ating goods and services? Same with that of the independent party. And when we say independent party, ito yung walang control, walang influence over the price, and the price is influenced only by the active forces in the market, which is the law of supply and demand. No? Okay. So, ano yung mga example po ng policy that we are going to make? The number one, no? Hindi naman to siya na number one na according to rank. These are the topic that we are going to discuss. No? So, number one in my list is the declaration of dividend. No? How are you going to declare dividend? Of course, sa corporation code natin, mayroon tayong law or regulated yung pag-declare ng dividend. Ano yun? You have to declare dividend kung may written earnings. And that written earnings is not appropriated. Why? Because even if there is a written earning, but that written earning is appropriated, meaning it is going to be spent in some projects, naka-tie up na siya dun sa project, then hindi mo na siya pwedeng galawin, you cannot declare dividend even if there is a written earnings. So, unappropriated written earnings, doon dapat manggagaling yung dividend that you are going to declare and pay to the stockholders. No? And in the declaration of dividend, paano natin masabi na arm's length siya? Of course, yung sabi natin na arm's length siya kasi dictated siya or in accordance with the law. No? Kasi yung iba, ito ano yung mga issues dito sa dividend. There are some na stockholders, at the same time, officer ng corporations, and then they are charging a very, very high salary, no? And then, ang dami nila withdrawal sa corporation, may mga transfer of funds, no? They are treated as constructive dividend. Parang kinukuha mo na yung share mo dun sa kita ng company indirectly, no? So that can be issues in the declaration of dividend. No? So dapat anong tamang proseso po sa pagbigay ng dividend? It should be declared for the stockholders of record, and it should be by the yung majority, no, ng hindi lang sa board of directors, kasama yung mga stockholders, no? Stockholders of record. So once na nag-declare na yung dividend, it should be appropriated. Saan siya manggagaling? Doon sa written earnings. And then, meron siyang declaration of dividend for the stockholders of record at the date. And then, kailan siya dineclare, kailan siya babayaran. No? Ano documentation natin doon? Siyempre, when you declare dividend, it should be coming from the declaration at nandoon yung board meeting and stockholders meeting. Also, during that board meeting and stockholders meeting, you have the record of attendance and then the agenda, what has been taken out or discussed during the meeting. So, nandoon po lahat yan. Papakita natin yung documentation na yon, no? As an abstract coming from the records of the stockholders meeting, yung declaration po ng dividend, no? And then, sa documentation natin, kasama na rin yung financial statements. Why? Because the financial statements will show to us how much is the income that goes to written earning of the company during the year, and if there is an available written earning for the payment of dividend. No? So, yun po yung mga documentation natin for declaration of dividend and of course payment of dividend. And then another policies that we can make, no, sa transfer pricing policy natin is the recognition or the valuation of the due to affiliates. No? Paano ba tayo recognize ng mga dues to affiliates natin. Ito yung due to affiliates, ito yung another related parties, no? So, pag sinabi mo kasi na due to, ikaw yung may utang sa kanila, no? The company yun yung may babayaran sa affiliates. Pag sinabi mo naman due from the affiliates, ito naman yung affiliates ang magbabayad sa company. So ito yung due to affiliates and due from the affiliates. How is this being documented, no? So siguro during the board meeting din, ang discussions dito on the due to and due from, no? And of course, if there is a policy manual, which is a requirement of the SEC or the Securities and Exchange Commission, policy manual for every company, no? Nandiyan na rin yung documentation on the treatment of this due to affiliates and due from affiliates, no? So may documentation din tayo dyan na records coming from the board of directors and yung recorded na mga meetings ng board. Yung may mga agenda and then may attendance sheet, no? Yung pag-uusapan doon yung due to at saka due from the affiliates. And then we have number 4, we have remittance of profits, no? Sometimes this remittance of profits came from the branch, no? If the branch is located in the Philippines and then meron siyang head office in US or in some other countries, the branch here in the Philippines will send a profit remittance to the company or the parent company. So ano yun? It would be subjected to 50% branch profit remittance tax, no? So meron din yung tax ang remittance of profits. And paano mo masabi na arm's length yung remittance ng profits, no? If it is made similar to that of the independent party dun sa remit din nila ng profits, no? Kasi ang sabi natin dito sa transfer pricing, we compare. So dapat meron tayong comparables dito, no? So sino yung comparables natin? Yung companies na nagre-remit din ng profits, no? The independent companies, hindi yung related parties din, no? Kasi gumagawa ako ngayon ng checklist na isa pa lang kami sa transfer pricing analysis, no? It's very exhaustive. Kasi ini-input ko na lahat yung mga things that will be taken during the transfer pricing audit, no? So we have our documentation and the policy, no? So sa remittance of profits, it should be subjected to a 15% branch profit remittance tax or depending on the treaty that we have. As I told you, we already have 43 countries, no, with tax treaty. Kaya nga pag may mga issues on remittance of profits with the parent company situated in other country, then you have to consult always the tax treaty. Or it is necessary also that the taxpayer should apply for tax treaty benefits before he or she can enjoy such benefits, no? Okay, so going back to our transfer pricing policy and documentation, how do we document the transfer of assets, and also what are the transfer pricing policies in the transfer of assets? When we say transfer of assets as a transaction, it can be that the parent company or the related party parent company is the owner of the assets and it is being transferred to the subsidiary. Or it can also be that the subsidiary owns the assets and then it is transferred to another subsidiary or to the parent company, no? So, how do we document the transfer of assets? Of course, meron yang deed of sale or whatever mode of transfer ang ginawa, no? Deed of conveyance, no? Pwede rin. So, itong transfer of assets, will consider para mamatawag siya na arm's length or compliant siya with the transfer pricing policy. So the transfer of assets, the payment of the assets transferred should be arm's length or at par with that of the independent party, no? So kung magkano yung halaga ng assets, dapat ganun din yung consideration that we put in our documents, no? To show proof on the transfer of assets. And remember na yung transfer of assets are very important yung mga documentation dito, even if you are related parties. Why? Because the transfer of assets are registrable, no? So there are regulations or regulatory agencies that regulate the transfer of assets, no? Paano i-transfer yung assets, paano yung pagbabayad ng clearances, yung mga requirements. Okay. So, how do we document the transfer of assets? We have to make contracts, no? Hindi pwede yung, sige, affiliated naman kami, ako din yung may-ari dun sa company na yan. So, hindi nare-resibuhan, kuha na lang ng assets. No, hindi yan po pwede. Dapat, yung assets, once transferred, there should be a corresponding documents na signed by both parties. And in that document, nakaspecify kung magkano yung babayaran. And that babayaran is arm's length. No, ibig sabihin natin ng arm's length, dapat yung consideration in the transfer of the assets, the amount is same with that of the independent parties. Hindi yung, bakit yung transfer of assets, ako din naman may-ari. Liitan lang natin kasi para maliit yung tax. Hindi po ganun, no? Kaya may benchmark tayo with the independent party kasi titingnan doon kung magkano ba talaga yung pagpa-transfer ng assets, no? And take note also that in the assets, there are registrable assets. At pag registrable yung property mo, just like land, machineries and equipment, no? So, you adhere to the regulatory requirements. No? So, meron na tayong, nakailan na tayo na policies sa transfer of assets, the remittance of profits, due from the affiliates, due to affiliates, and the declaration of dividend. No? So, yun na yung na-discuss natin. Now, we go to number 6, the offsetting of receivables and payables. So, sa iba, hindi inaalaw yung offsetting of receivables and payable, but internally, this can be done by the associated parties or the affiliate parties. No? Pwede nilang gawin yan. Offsetting of receivables and payables. No? So, kailan mo pwedeng i-offset yung receivables and the payables? Siguro pwede kang mag-offset if both the obligation is already due, no? So, halimbawa, yung payable mo, dapat due na yan para ma-offset mo dito sa receivables, no? Ito yung mga due, mga dues din, no? So, offsetting of receivables and payables coming from the other party of the related parties, no? And we also have the compensation of key personnel. Although, doon sa BIR Form 1709, ang sabi doon, hindi na kailangan i-disclose yung compensation of key personnel. No? So, hindi na kailangan na ipakita mo yung compensation ng key personnel. Yeah. Nasa, ano yan nasa RR 34-2020. Okay. And then, number 8, we have advances, no? So, ito na yung advances. Actually, yan din yung mga due to affiliates, due from affiliates, no? Okay. So, after the compensation of key personnel, we will discuss to you the advances. Pero kung halimbawa naman po may key personnel talaga na compensation, how are you going to document that? No? So yung compensation of key personnel dapat anong proof? Dapat may payroll, no? And then yung compensation nila kung meron kang comparable sa independent party, then you have to present it para mapakita mo that the compensation that you pay is the same with that of the independent parties. No? Okay. So, balikan natin yung offsetting of receivables and payables. Ang sabi ko sa inyo, dapat due and demandable na yung bawat isa para pwede kayong mag-offset, no? Okay. So, number 8, advances. No? So, ano itong mga advances na to? Ito yung depende, no? Kung sinong nagbigay nito. Can be stockholders, can be the board of directors, no? So, advances are considered liability, no? Okay. So, another policy, no, and documentation is the purchase of raw materials, no? Kasi, halimbawa, the function of the company under study is manufacturing. So, benchmark ka ngayon o kukuha ka ng comparables who are also engaged in manufacturing. No? So, ganyan sa purchase of raw material. Kasi usually, pagka manufacturing company yung company mo dito sa Pilipinas, yung raw materials niyan sometimes galing pa sa ibang bansa. No? Number 10, sale of finished products. So, ito na. Diyan na papasok yung mga tax savings, yung mga artificial price management. Diyan na yan sa sale of finished products. No? And then sa purchases of raw materials, ito naman purchases of raw materials kung nangyayari ito between related parties. Halimbawa, the supplier of the raw materials are the parent company, no? Okay, so we have here the purchases of raw materials and also the sale of finished product, no? Sino ba yung kumukuha ng finished products? Why? Kasi pagka yung finished products mo, you only have one supplier and you always have one purchaser, isa lang yung bumibili, isa lang din yung nagbibigay ng raw materials, no? So, in that case, ano yung magiging documentation natin sa purchase of raw materials and sale of finished product? Of course, dito yung ating resibo, no? So, kung raw materials yan na goods, then you have to ang goods, ang ginagamit dyan na supporting documents is the sales invoice, and for the services, our supporting is the official receipt, no? So, yan po. Kasi we're talking of documentation, no? So, you have to document. Otherwise, kawawa tayo pagdating ng transfer pricing audit. No? So, for the sale of the finished products, no, you have to consider the markup, no? Kasi related parties yan. Okay, so how much is the markup? So, it should be that the markup is, sinong magma-markup dito? Yun na yung seller, no? Kasi magsisell na siya ng finished products, and in that finished products, may component pa yan na cost. So, malalaman natin ngayon how much is the markup, no? Okay. Number 11, use provision for intangible assets, no? Kasi yung intangible assets are very important part talaga because value drivers po sila ng isang may business, no? So, ano yung documentation po natin pagdating sa provision for intangible assets? Of course, kung yung intangible mo is that software yan, tapos ni-license mo, yung license agreement na yan should be the attachment po dito sa intangible assets, no? And then we have the intragroup services. Ano itong mga intragroup services? Yun yung mga services within the group, no? So, anong hahanapin mo dyan? The service agreement, and then you have to consider the service fee and the management, no? And then in number 10, we have the business restructuring. So what are the transfer pricing policy for business restructuring? No? Kasi yung business restructure, you change the functions of your company. Kaya ang tawag sa kanya restructure. Kasi nag-restructure ka. No? Okay. So, doon sa service agreements, intragroup services, there should be a service agreement no between the parties. And you have to consider na arm's length yung payment ng service fee and also yung professional fee for the management. No? So be sure that these are all properly documented. And once documented na ano po yung ating requirements sa documentation, we have to retain the copy of the documentation for 10 years. No? Okay. So, ano pa yung ibang natin na mga policies no, that we have to consider? The business restructuring, the cost contribution arrangement. No? How much is the contribution? Halimbawa na lang, yung group of companies, nakahouse siya sa isang building, no, owned by the parent company. No? So when we said na we have to determine how much is the expense na i-share nila doon sa stay nila on that building. No? That is comparing your commercial and financial transactions with that of the independent party transactions. No? So, the result of this business restructuring sometimes changes the functions of the other subsidiary companies. No? So, papaano dinodokumento ang business restructuring? No? There should be a document to show kung magkano binayaran your, how much is the consideration for business restructuring. No? So, anong documentation natin dyan sa business restructuring? Yung mga agreement, no, service level agreement. Okay. So, how to make a transfer pricing policy? No, we should consider the arm's length principle when we craft our transfer pricing policy. No? For the cost contribution arrangement, ito yung mga ano natin, yung contribution or group expenses, no, that go contribute tayo. So, paano mo masabi that the cost contribution arrangement mo is arm's length? Of course, if based on your contribution, naka-receive ka ng benepisyo or ng benefits that commensurate to your contribution. Halimbawa, contribute ka ng 50,000, dapat yung 50,000 na cost contribution mo should commensurate also doon sa babalik sa iyo or dito sa kung bakit ka nagbayad, no? Okay. So, another policy that we should craft on the acquisition of fixed assets, no? So, ano ba ang policy ng company, no, on the acquisition of fixed assets, no? Kasi itong fixed assets, sometimes the assets is owned by the other subsidiaries, sometimes owned by the parent company, no? So when you acquire the fixed assets, ano ba yan? Binili mo o binigay lang sa iyo? And sometimes yung pagbigayan or pagbintahan at no consideration, no? Kasi binigay lang kasi ano naman siya, yung affiliated companies or subsidiaries, no? Okay. So, ano yung posible natin na policy in the acquisition of fixed assets? Of course, we have to fix the consideration. Hindi pwede na walang consideration yung pag-acquire natin ng fixed assets from another related parties. Okay. Shout out?
Meron ma'am.
O sige, shout out muna.
Shoutout po ma'am kay Ma'am Fe Herrera.
Oo, talaga, si Ma'am Fe. As always, no? So, good evening, Ma'am Fe. Sino pa?
Siya lang ma'am, pero may question din siya ma'am.
O, sige, sagot muna tayo ng question.
Ako yung question niya ma'am, transfer pricing documentations po ba kailangan sa regular filing of compliances, quarterly and annual?
Sa quarterly po kailangan yung transfer pricing documentation, sa annual lang, no? At meron nga tayong threshold na dapat yung sales is 150 million and 190 million between related parties. At meron din tayong threshold on the transfer of tangible assets. Ito nga yung nasabi ko dito, yung acquisition ng fixed assets, no? Yung transfer ng tangible assets, 60 million. So, pasok na siya. Kailangan mag-submit ka ng transfer pricing documentation. And for the provision of services naman, 15 million. No? Pasok na rin siya sa kailangan ng magbigay ng BR Form 1709 or the transfer pricing documentation. Okay?
Lang ma'am siya.
Oh, sige. Ilan yung viewers natin?
9 viewers.
I-chat mo sila, Banji.
Apo, siya.
Nandyan na sila? Hindi mo makita.
Sir, ma'am, hindi nag-ano eh.
Okay. O, sige. So, tuloy po tayo ha. Kasi dito na tayo sa acquisition of fixed assets. Kaya nga, ang sabi natin sa acquisition of fixed assets, it should conform with the arm's length principle and it should be similar to what the independent parties are doing when they acquire fixed assets, no? Kasi between related parties yan. So, dapat i-value mo yung fixed assets at the value na parang tama doon sa kung anong klase siyang assets, no? Ang example ko dito, yung isang na-audit ko na yung fixed assets niya, yung mga top of the line niya na mga sasakyan, binalyo niya ng peso, no? And then transfer sa mga officers, no? In that case, that is a potential transfer pricing issue. Why? Kasi, halimbawa, Fortuner, binalyo lang ng piso. Anong magiging violation dyan sa policy mo? Meron bang Fortuner na peso? No? Kasi kahit nasabihin mo na fully depreciated yan, meron pa din yung salvage value, no? Nabebenta pa rin. And then, i-value mo lang ng peso and then transfer mo. No? So, is it arm's length? Of course, the answer is it is not. So, how are you going to document the transactions? Of course, yung deed of conveyance o yung deed of sale nung pagka-registrable property. Pagka hindi naman yung resibo, the sales invoice, no, to prove that there is really a sale na nangyari between the parties. Okay, so how do we document deed of sale or resibo or deed of conveyance? No? Another that we have to consider are the travel expenses. No? Kasi nakita ko sa mga multinational companies, the travel expenses is so huge that something like ilang million during the year. So, ang tanong natin, is it arm's length? No? Ganon din ba ang ma-incur na expenses for travel ng independent company? At saka, bakit kailangan ng ganon ka-tedious na travel expenses? No? Yun yung sabi ko sa inyo, na the act of the taxpayers will be manifested, no, sa actual niya na ginagawa. No? Bakit? Because yung isang na-audit ko, when I was still in the BIR, na hiningan ko ng transfer pricing documentation, nagbigay naman sila. No? So, ano yun? Yung, there are always travel. No? Ang dami, every month. So, nagtataka ako, bakit kailangan mag-travel ng mga tao na to? And yet, BPO lang naman yung kanilang company dito sa Pilipinas, no? Business process outsourcing. At ano yung ginagawa? nagko-convert ng mga books into e-books, no? So, gumagawa sila ng ganyan. And sino yung nangungulekta? The parent company, hindi naman dito sa Pilipinas. Pero nagtataka ako, bakit ang dami nilang travel expenses? And every month, there are auditors coming here in the Philippines para mag-audit. Siguro mga 5. And that cost so huge amount to the company. Sabi ko, ano ba ang ginagawa ng mga auditor dito? Bakit every month nag-audit talaga sila? Bakit, no? So, in the course of my examination, I was able to found out na ang sales nila during the year is booked at 800 million, no, dito sa Pilipinas. But if you try to look at their bank accounts, no, may mga remittance sila na sobrang dami, umabot ng 8 billion a year, no? So from 800 million to 8 billion. So ilang level 'yan, no? Ang ratio over the sales ng local, no? So I was able to found out that the travel expenses was paid to the auditor who audit their sales remittance, no? Kasi yung sales nila dito na niremit sa Pilipinas, hindi na doon sa head office, dinivert nila, no? So yun yung reason. Why is it that there are travel expenses, very huge amount na pinapasa nila dito sa Pilipinas? So hindi yun para doon sa outsourcing activity nila, kung hindi doon sa pag sa US ka, repatriation of income mo yan capital, no? Kung hindi doon sa dinivert nila na sales nila in the other countries, aniremit po nila dito sa Pilipinas, no? Kaya sila nagpapa-audit and they spend so much for the travel of the auditor. And then, paano po natin yan document yung travel expenses? Siyempre, yung actual, no? Saan-saan pumupunta, no? So, yung actual for the travel expenses. Yung documentation natin dyan are receipts, no? Resibo. Okay. And we also have the key management personnel. Although, sa BIR Form 1709, you need not disclose the key management personnel. Pero, the key management personnel can still be a potential issues in the transfer pricing audit, no? Kaya nga, yung key management personnel, although it's not required na under BIR Form 1709, but still, pagdating po sa disclosures, pagdating pa sa iba, we still have to report the key management personnel. Okay, so yun lang yung bahagi ko sa inyo yung kunting kaalaman on the crafting of the transfer pricing policy and of course the documentation, no? So how to make a transfer pricing policy? So we have to develop a transfer pricing policy that conforms with the arm's length principle. And what is that arm's length principle? No, yung arm's length principle will tell us that the transactions of the related party transaction should be comparable with that of the independent party transactions because the independent party transactions are the real transactions. No? Okay. So, wala nang tanong?
Wala.
Okay. Kasi, sa transfer pricing policy, it follows yung documentation. Kaya magkasama yan transfer pricing policy and transfer pricing documentation. No? Okay, so how to make the transfer pricing policy and also the documentation? Of course, yung policy mo that conforms with that of the arm's length principle should be documented, no? And what are the sources of documents? Will help us in making our transfer pricing policy. Of course, yung documentation natin on the act of the board of directors and then yung mga contracts that are being signed, no? So, ganyan po tayo pag gumawa ng transfer pricing policy. Ang dami na yan kasi depende yan sa structure ng business nyo, no? So, hindi yan ano lang, yung limited, no? So, ang dami. So, when we make our transfer pricing policy, be sure na kung ano yung ginagawa ng independent parties, nandoon din sa atin sa transfer pricing policy. Okay. So, documentation, how do we go about our documentation? Once we have our documents, we have to keep them for a period of 10 years, no? That is under Revenue Regulation 17-2013. Okay. Okay. May ano pa, may shoutout pa?
Wala pa pong siya.
Okay. So before we start po dun sa ating case that we are going to discuss tonight, na yung sabi ko, this is a very good case kasi dito in-explain how important is the transfer pricing documentation at paano siya pinresent sa court. No? So, break lang ako ng 5 minutes before I start with the case. Okay. Let's now go back to our discussion, no? And our case is Pharma Distributor AS versus Eastern High Court of Denmark, no? So yun yung case natin. Before I discuss our case, I would like to invite po sa mga viewers natin to please attend our seminar on March 11 and 12. Tama ba, Hare? March 11 and 12, and that is the seminar, free today seminar for tax preparer, no? Bakit tax preparer? Kasi, di ba, tax filing season na. So, ano yung ipiprepare natin? Income tax, no? So, may mga guides tayo on how to prepare the financial statements for the manufacturer, for the contractors, non-stock, non-profit organization, cooperatives, and then, ano yung dapat natin malaman on itemized deductions, and of course, the notes to financial statements, the disclosures, no? Kasi ang daming na experiences natin dyan na pe-penalize tayo ng SEC because kulang-kulang yung ating notes to financial statements, no? Okay. So let's go to this discussion, no? The Pharma Distributor AS versus the Tax Court of Denmark, no? Okay. So ano po itong case na to? The case is about transfer pricing method, the goodwill amortization at saka yung repatriation ng capital, no? So, ano yung topics natin dito? The deductions and depreciation and also the transfer pricing, no? So, nandito yung arm's length principle, the net margins, the benchmark, documentation, no? Kaya nga sabi ko sa inyo, sa lahat ng transfer pricing cases, documentation is very important, no? There are cases na matatalo sa court yung taxpayer because of inadequate na documentation. But as long as yung documentation natin are complete and every transaction has been disclosed, then kahit may mga gray area pa, no, the court will resolve it in favor of the taxpayer, no? Basta kompleto ka ng documentation and then all the sales, all the expenses are properly documented and recognized, then malamang na talaga na panalo, no? Okay. So the case was brought before year 1 business year City Court on March 16, 2017, no? Was by the City Court order of June 8, 2017, referred for consideration by the Eastern High Court pursuant to the Administration of Justice Act, Section 226, Paragraph 1. Ano tong Eastern High Court, no? Ito na yung pinaka-Supreme Court nila, no? So, what happened in this case? The case concerns whether the tax authorities are entitled to increase. To increase meaning nag-assess siya, no? Dinagdagan niya yung income to increase A and B's taxable income kasi si A and B ito yung related party, no? By Dennis Krohn, 57,101,000 for each of the income years 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, and 2010. So, 5 years po itong investigation na nagkaroon ng adjustment on the income tax. Okay. With reference to the fact that A, in the pricing in control transactions between A and group, companies have not applied prices and terms that are in accordance with the arm's length principle in Section 2 of the Tax Assessment Act. So, ano yung reason bakit na-assess sila? Kasi hindi arm's length ang transactions, no? Okay, so what are the allegations? The plaintiff, sino yung plaintiff dito? The Ministry of Taxation, no? Has in principle filed a claim that A must recognize that the company's taxable income is increased by Dennis Krohn, 57,101,000 in each of the income years 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010. And that B must acknowledge, no? Yun yung sabi ng Ministry of Taxation. Must acknowledge that the company's joint taxation income is increased with Dennis Krohn 57,101,000 each of the income years 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10. No? So, pinapadagdagan yung income. Ibig sabihin, in-adjust. So, in the alternative, the Ministry of Taxation has filed a claim that A must recognize that the statement of the company's taxable income in the income years 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10 is remanded, no, for consideration by the Danish Tax Agency, and that B must acknowledge that the statement of the company's joint taxable income in the income years 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, and 2010 are remanded for examination by the Danish Tax Agency. No? Okay, so the defendants A and B have applied for dismissal. No? Pinapadismiss nila yung case. So, ito yung 5 years, no? Anong sabi ng court dito? I-remand or ibalik sa tax agency, sa Danish Tax Agency. Sa atin yan, ibalik sa examiner for re-examination, no? So, binalik yung case for re-examination, remanded to the lower court. Okay. So, case presentation. The Danish company A, thereafter A, is a subsidiary of B, hereinafter B, which is ultimately owned by GI. A and B are jointly taxed, no? No. So, pareho sila dalawa si A at saka B na taxed jointly. Okay. A deals with the registration of generic drug substances. Ito na yung kanilang functions, no? So, si A, siya yung deals with the registration of generic drug substances, not patent-protected medicines. Kaya nga, generic no? As well as the sale and distribution of this on the Danish and Nordic market. No? So, si A yan. Sales are made directly to independent parties, in particular wholesalers. A does not manufacture or develop medicines or other products. A is thus only a sales company in the B group. No? Okay. So, dito pa lang sa explanation, you can always refer, no? And if they are properly documented, so you can always refer. A's activities are described as follows in the company transfer pricing documentation for 2009 and 2010. No? Okay. So, characterization of the transactions, no? A as a distribution company. No? So, si A daw, distribution company. A can be characterized as a distributor with marketing functions as the entity is performing sales and marketing activities at its own risk and reward carrying out marketing strategies and campaigns, as well as having inventory risk and administrative functions to support these sales and marketing activities. Oh? So A is a full function distributor carrying a range of market and business risk. No? So yun yung full function distributor. No? So meron siyang market and business risk. Okay. So A's company history and its goodwill, assets and depreciation thereof. No? So ito yung history kasi yung company A is the product of many merger, consolidation, no? Okay. So A's company history and its goodwill, assets and depreciation thereof. Kaya sa mga ginagawa kong transfer pricing analysis, meron na rin akong nilalagay na history, no? In order that you can understand the company better, no? So A's company history and its goodwill, assets and depreciation, o saan nanggagaling yun? The current A was established on January 1, 2006 through a merger with G2AS, no? So ang daming mga merger dito. And with the company's subsidiary, na company G3AS, no? With underlying subsidiaries. The merger was carried out tax-free according to the merger method so that J2AS and J3AS activities were merged with A's existing activities with the new A as the continuing company, no? So merong merger na nangyari, no? And then si A is the continuing company. Okay. So prior to this, B had in 2004 acquired A, no? Then G4AS, no? So si B na-acquire niya si A, no? So in 1998, prior to the merger with G2AS, had acquired the shares in G5AS, and after G5AS, for just over 1 billion, no? So, in-acquire, sino nag-acquire dito? Si A, no? In-acquire niya yung shares ni G5AS. So, how much niya in-acquire sa yung shares? Danish krone 1 billion, no? So, isang company lang yan, no? The purchase price for the shares significantly exceeded G5AS book equity. As DKK 913,610, approximately 19 of the purchase price was attributed to the unbooked intangible asset in the form of goodwill, which G5AS founded in 1927, no, had accumulated. Okay. Okay, so maganda po tong kaso na to kasi mamaya babasahin ng court kung ano yung nasa documentation, no? Okay. May shout out pa?
Wala pa po.
Ilan yung viewers?
9 viewers.
Okay. Sige, tuloy lang po, no? So the shares that G2AS had acquired in G5AS were included in G2AS, no? Annual report until 2002 at cost price, which is why the independent annual reports did not state an independent goodwill asset, no? So, ito yung palaging nawawala, no, sa mga annual reports, yung intangibles. In 2003, however, G2AS changed its accounting policies. No, ano yung accounting policies? For presenting the annual report in accordance with accounting class C, no, against previous accounting class B, no. So G2AS annual report for 2003 states this and that amortization of goodwill, no, following. Ito na. Excuse me. Okay. So the annual report for G2AS and G6 is presented in accordance with the provision of the Danish Financial Statements Act for Class C large companies. Oh, so large taxpayer pala to si A. Sino si A dito? Siya yung si Pharma Distributor AS. Oh? Pharma Distributor AS. Okay. The accounting policies applied have changed compared to last year. No? Nag-change siya ng accounting standard. In accordance, as the annual report is presented in accordance with accounting class A compared to previous class B. No? So this entails changes in the following areas. So ito yung changes because of the accounting standard change. Investment in associated companies are measured in the parent company's accounts according to the equity method of at previous cost, no? Okay. Goodwill is recognized per January 1, 2002 and it is depreciated over an expected residual life of 16 years, no? Corresponding to a total maximum life from the date of acquisition of 20 years. Okay. As a result of the changed accounting policies, an asset in the form of goodwill from the acquisition of G5AS was recognized in G2 annual report for 2003 with an acquisition price of DKK Danish krone 913.6 million, no? So yun yung valuation nila. And a balance sheet value of 799.4 million, no, krone. According to the annual report, that goodwill would then be depreciated linearly over 16 years with 57.1 million, no, Danish krone per year, which also happened. No, imagine ilang million yun for 16 years, no? So in June 2005, G7 took over G6, and thus indirectly the share capital in G5AS. After the merger on January 1, 2006, with A as the continuing company, no? The goodwill related to G2AS acquisition of G5AS was included in A's annual report for 2006, after which the straight line amortization of goodwill of 57.1 million continued from 2006 onwards. No? So the depreciation was only a write-down of the carrying amount. The depreciation did not give rise to a deduction in the taxable income for the company, as goodwill was established by a tax-free merger. Okay. As impairment test for the period 2006 and 2010. ACE annual reports for the period 2006 to 2009 state that a so-called impairment test would be prepared annually. No? So the annual report for 2006 thus states that intangible fixed assets are written down to the recoverable amount if this value is lower than the carrying amount. No? Okay. So the assets assessed annually, no? So parang sa Pilipinas din na annual yung assessment. However, no impairment test was carried out in 2006, no? So wala daw impairment test. As it was assessed, the G3 had been purchased at market price and that the book goodwill was therefore present, no? So yun yung sabi. In the years 2007 to 2010, impairment tests were prepared every year, no? So yung impairment test, in which the goodwill present in B and A together was valued. Okay. It was tested whether there was a goodwill in the companies corresponding to what was recognized in the accounts, no? So may impairment test. It appears from the impairment test prepared for 2007 that goodwill totaling DKK 1.086 million was recognized. DKK distributed with 571 million Danish krone in A and 515 million, no? So the impairment test showed that in A and B together, there was at least values corresponding to the recognized goodwill, which is why the impairment test did not give rise to extraordinary depreciation. No? Kasi din-appreciate nila yung, inamortize nila yung goodwill. In 2008, the impairment test showed that the values in the companies did not correspond to the recognized goodwill. No? So which is why an extraordinary Danish krone 225 million was written off. No? So DKK in goodwill in B. No? So in 2009 and 2010, the impairment test did not give rise to extraordinary depreciation. Okay. So according to A's annual reports, the goodwill recognized in A amounted to the following. No? Value at the start of the financial year, depreciation, value at the end of the financial year. No? Okay. So yung depreciation claim, pare-pareho lang kasi straight line. No? So 57,101,000. Okay. So value at the end of the financial year. Okay. So an audit report for 2006 and 2010, no? So they were subjected to the annual report. Has been approved by the auditor, was not made any reservations regarding the value of the stated goodwill. No? So in the audit reports for 2007 to 2009, however, the auditor emphasizes that the valuation of goodwill has been considered in more detail, especially in view of the losses that A realized in 2006, 2007, 8, and 9. So in the audit report for 2006, the auditor states, among other things, the following. Oh. So ito yung audit report. No? So capital matters, due to the significant loss in 2006, no? So net loss nila. Net equity has decreased to amount to only Danish krone 8 million. No? Baba. Given the total assets of DKK 1.41 million, we have discussed the capital structure and the adequacy of the capital with management. No? Kaya makikita mo yung adequacy ng capital with management, no, doon sa okay. So capital structure and adequacy of capital with management. No? So management has explained that significant improvements are expected in the future, both as a result of the new agreed transfer prices on products and considering the cost for exceptional provisions and write-down which influenced the result in 2006. No? Okay. So, valuation of goodwill. So, dito na yung court, no? Tatanong na. So, a formal updated impairment test has not been prepared at this year-end. No? Rather, management has relied on the fair market value calculation prepared at group level at October 1, 2005. No? So, the calculation put a fair market value of euro 150 million or Danish krone 1.125 million on the G3 business. No? Okay. So, yan po yung sa valuation of goodwill. No? So, the audit report for 2009 states, among other things, the following: valuation of goodwill. No? Okay. Paano binavalue yung goodwill? The carrying amount of goodwill, Danish krone 457.6 million, comprises goodwill on consolidation in the former G2AS, no? Which has been retained as goodwill in the market balance. The valuation of the goodwill has been considered in particular given the continued losses realized in 2009. No? Okay. Maganda tong ano na to case, no? Kasi this talks about the documentation, no? So, valuation of goodwill. The carrying amount of goodwill, Danish krone 457.6 million, comprises goodwill on consolidation in the former G2AS, no? Which has been retained as goodwill in the merger balance. The valuation of the goodwill has been considered in particular given the continued losses realized in 2009. No? Okay. In connection with the finalization of the financial statement, management has prepared an impairment test for the combined goodwill in A and the parent company B. No? Okay. So the impairment calculation is based on the strategy plan for A and includes assumed lower cost prices on products from group suppliers that are to give the company an increased and adequate profitability. So we understand from management that the group suppliers have confirmed the lower transfer prices, no? In management review in the financial statements, it is stated that group management followed the development of the company and has indicated its intention to ensure the necessary future financing and provided necessary capital. Okay. Okay, so based on the above, we have accepted the valuation of goodwill. No? So, yun yung valuation ng goodwill. Okay. Okay, so yun, as transfer pricing documentation. So, dito na papasok, no? Yung sabi natin na documentation na bakit kailangan natin mag-comply, no? So, on July 29, 2011, SCAT, this is the tax authority of Denmark, no? Until its dissolution on July 2018. Dinisolve na to, no? Yung tax authority of Denmark. Okay. On July 29, 2011, SCAT contacted A and B in order to obtain the company's transfer pricing documentation. Okay. Hereinafter, TP documentation for the period 2006 and 2010. No? So the material was submitted in September 2011 and supplementary material was submitted in March 27, 2012. No? Okay. Transfer pricing documentation was submitted for 2006, 7, 8, 9, and 10. No? Okay. The transfer pricing documentation for 2006 to 2007. Okay. Okay. The transfer pricing documentation for 2006 and 2007. No? So it appears from ASTP documentation for 2006 to 2007 that a significant part of the products distributed by A were manufactured and delivered by other companies within G7. No? It thus appears that approximately 75 to 85% of the company's purchases were made intra-group and that approximately 80% of intra-group trading was conducted with a group affiliated company, G8 in year 2 country. It is with group companies including G8. The sale of goods, on the other hand, took place to independent third parties, in particular, wholesalers. No? Magpatay ka ng lamok dito, Hari. Pag ganyan. Okay. Okay. Yun. Diyan yan sila eh. Okay. So furthermore, it appears from the TP documentation for 2006, 2007 that the international G7 had net sales of DKK, Danish krone, 38.1 billion. No? So during the period, US dollars and a net income of 6.5 to 7.2 billion. No? US dollars from A's annual accounts for 2006 and 2007, it appears that A had a profit before tax of 144.4 million and 107.7 million kron. No? A has stated in the transfer pricing documentation, yan na yung sabi ko sa inyo, that the transfer pricing documentation will be used, no? For 2006-2007, that there was a negative price development in the market for generic products, no? Okay. So, which development is intensified by the new low-price competitors who are entering the generic market. As a result, A lost market share. Okay, so the heading intangible assets. Okay. So ano naman itong intangible assets? The value of the intellectual property rights shown in the balance sheet of A is 628.896 Danish krone and 571.795 Danish krone also. No? Closing balance year in 2006 and year in 2007 respectively. And is relating to the goodwill of the former G3 business. No? Yun na yung ni-recognize. Okay, so closing balance year-end 2006 and year-end 2007 respectively, and is relating to the goodwill of the former G3 business. So G3's acquisition of G5AS, the following paragraphs expand on the intellectual property, which may be important from a functional point of view, but which is not shown in the balance sheet. No. A is now the owner of brand name, trademark AG, but A only have marketing authorization rights in the Nordic countries. No? So, limited lang yung rights niya. No? Under the heading purchase of products, ito po yung mga information na din i-discuss ko sa inyo coming from the transfer pricing documentation. Yan. So under the heading purchase of products, the transfer pricing documentation for 2006-2007 states. The supplying company must additionally cope with its large portfolio of products and take into consideration numerous services and tangibles that are not necessarily related to individual products. No? So the supply prices are therefore negotiated between the supplying company and A with a view to the overall profitability of A by applying the resale basket pricing method. No? The overall objective of this method is to negotiate supply prices by taking as a starting point the foreseeable turnover of the local company and negotiating on the gross margin, which should actually adequately remunerate its function and lead to an acceptable net operating margin. No? Basket pricing does not mean that no particular attention is paid to the importance of the single products to be sold or to their market shares. Okay. Ilan pa yung viewers natin? Nakailang oras na tayo?
1 hour 30 minutes. Yung viewers, ma'am, 8.
Okay. Sige. Okay. So sabi ko na nga sa inyo, ito yung presentation ng documents and how does the tax authority nila make use of the information. Okay. Okay, so in conclusion, the resale basket pricing method leads to an overall gross margin that is intended to cover the cost of locally performed functions and leave an adequate profit rewarding the risk related to the functions. Okay, so therefore, as a starting point, the resale basket price method has been selected the most appropriate method for setting the prices, no? So yung gusto nila yung resale basket price method. Based on the consideration mentioned in general resale margin of 30% is used, no? Margin, general resale margin. Okay, so 30% is used. The initial supply price is thus arrived at in negotiation by applying the resale price method, no? So resale price method, magkano yung margin? 30%, no? So regarding the choice of economic analysis, when assessing the arm's length principle, the following is stated under the heading economic analysis, no? We determine that the TNMM is the method that should be employed to evaluate the arm's length return for A. No? Okay. So applying the TNMM, we have searched for comparable companies and perform economic analysis to determine a range of operating margins. No? So the full range of a three-year average operating margin 2006 to 2008 determined a minimum of 0.89% and a maximum of 7.2%. No? So the interquartile range showed a lower quartile of 1.8 and an appropriate and upper quartile of 5.27 and a median of 3.52. Excuse me. Okay. So, regarding the choice of economic analysis, when assessing the arm's length principle, the following is stated under the heading economic analysis. Okay. So, may economic analysis siya. We determine that the TNMM is the method that should be employed to evaluate the arm's length return for A. No? So applying the TNMM, we have searched for comparable companies and performed economic analysis to determine a range of operating margin. The full range of a 3-year average operating margin 2006 to 2008 determined a minimum of 0.89 and a maximum of 7.02. Okay. The interquartile range showed a lower quartile of 1.8 and an upper quartile of 5.27% and a median of 3.52%. So pag gumawa na kayo ng conclusion, if you are doing the transfer pricing documentation at sa transfer pricing analysis report, ito po yung inyong recommendation. So it looks like this, ha? No? Paano niya in-explain? The full range of a 3-year average operating margin 2006 to 2008 determined a minimum of 0.89% and a maximum of 7.02%. No? So the interquartile range showed a lower quartile of 1.8% and an upper quartile of 5.27 and a medium of 3.5 to 3.52%. Okay. According to the OECD guidelines, section 2.8, the following consideration should be made. Non-operating items such as interest income and expenses and income taxes should be excluded from the determination of the net profit indicator. No? Exceptional and extraordinary items of a non-recurring nature should generally also be excluded. So, hindi rin siya kasama. This, however, is not always the case, as there may be situations where it would be appropriate to include them, no, depending on the circumstances of the case and on the function being undertaken and risk being borne by the tested party, no. So even where exceptional and extraordinary items are not taken into account in the tested party, no? Even where exceptional and extraordinary items are not taken into account in the determination of the net profit indicator, it may be useful to review them because they can provide valuable information for the purpose of comparability analysis. For instance, by reflecting that the tested party bears a given risk, no? So, okay. So, that's how yung documentation po ginagamit ng court, no? Adjustments are accordingly made for non-operating expenses and extraordinary items in the accounts in order to achieve reliable comparability, no? So, ito yung naging basis nila. There is agreement that the median is rightfully 3.82% and that's not as stated as 3.52%. So, kasi isa konting percentage lang na magkakaiba kung billion na yung sales mo, no? Usually, expression in percentage of sales kasi napakalaki na ng effect doon sa taxable income, no? So it thus appears from the transfer pricing documentation, ayan sa court na ito that A has used the so-called transactional net margin method. So anong nagiging issue nila dito, the transfer pricing method, no? Here and after the transactional net margin method. So in calculating whether A has acted in accordance with the arm's length principle and that adjustment have been made for non-operating expenses. So in the transfer pricing documentation, A has used the same method every 5 years, no, 2006 to 2010. A number of companies have been selected for the calculation. Ito na yung comparables na ginagamit natin. And a benchmark has been calculated. Anong benchmark? Ito na yung gagawa ka na ng arm's length range nila, no? And a benchmark has been calculated based on these companies. The Ministry of Taxation has not objected to either the choice of method, companies, or the calculated benchmark, no? So walang objection yung tax authority. So under the heading adjustment and analysis of the 2006 result, various adjustments are explained for salary, bonus, extraordinary depreciation on inventory. These adjustments are not in dispute, no? Hindi rin nagreklamo ang tax authority. It appears that in 2006, A made the following adjustments. Ito na yung 2006 na adjustments, no? Ni A. In Dennis Crown, yun yung kanilang sa atin peso, no? Sa yung pera nila. Okay. So operating margin annual report negative, no? Tingnan mo negative. How much is the negative niya? 126,017. Okay. So, adjustment one-time effects. Ano yun? Retention bonus sa employees. O, tingnan nyo may retention bonus yung employees. 37,500. Rent obligation G3 lease, year 1, business year. 7,113. No? Environmental clean-up provisions, 7,500. Impairment of fixed assets, year 1, business year plant, 17,340 thousand most common. Further integration cost in year, IT consultants, no? How much is that? 10,000. Goodwill depreciation, ito yung 57,101 on the inamortize nila na depreciation ng goodwill, no? Extraordinary write-off inventory, nag-write-off sila na inventory, 20,472. Adjusted operating margin, paano nila in-adjust yung operating margin? Yung 3.82%, no? At hindi yung 3.52% na sinasabi doon sa transfer pricing report. No? So adjusted operating margin 31.009, no? Net revenue annual report 1,033,630. Adjusted operating margin is 3%, no? 3% lang. As justification for the adjustment regarding goodwill, it is stated under adjustment and analysis of the 2006 result. No. There is adjusted for amortization of acquired goodwill. Parang dinisallow, no, yung amortization ng goodwill. The goodwill in the accounts is relating to the goodwill of the former G3 business, G3's acquisition of G5AS. The amortization of accounting goodwill is accordingly not an operation expense, such and is not deductible for tax. Kasi goodwill lang yan eh, di ba? Hindi yan sa Pilipinas, hindi yan recognize, no? Kasi sabi niya, accounting goodwill is accordingly not an operation expense, no? As such and is not deductible for tax purposes. No? So, this is allowed. As a consequence, it should be excluded from the determination of the profit indicator to be comparable with the results in the benchmark analysis. No? So, the amount of amortized goodwill accounting is 57,101 Danish krone. No? Itong Danish krone, ito yung pera ng Denmark. Sa atin, peso, the conversion rate is 7.78. So, 7 pesos and 78 centavos equals to 1 Danish krone. As can be seen after the adjustments, A ended at an adjusted operating margin of 3%, no? Which was within the limits of the lower 1.8% and upper quartile 5.27% in the calculated benchmark. On that basis, A concluded that the TP documentation sufficiently documented that action had been taken in accordance with the arm's length principle. A made a similar adjustment for goodwill amortization in the figures for 2007. A then sent on an adjusted operating margin of 3.43%, which was also within the quartile. No? Kasi may tinatawag tayo na interquartile range, di ba? Limbawa, yung range mo from negative 0.1. Tapos yung sa ginawa mong comparables mo ng mga companies, ang pinakamataas niya is 5%. So within that range, correct pa rin yung gross profit, no? So okay. As can be seen after the adjustment, ito na, as at A ended at an adjusted operating margin of 3%, which was within the limit of the lower 1.8% and upper quartile 5.27% in the calculated benchmark. On that basis, A concluded that the TP documentation sufficiently documented that action had been taken in accordance with the arm's length principle. Kaya nga pag gumagawa tayo ng transfer pricing analysis, after presenting your comparable and then i-present mo yung range ng kanilang gross profit if you are using the resale price at saka cost plus method, no? And then, gagawa ka na ngayon ng conclusion, no? Anong ilagay mo? A concluded that here two action had been taken in accordance with the arm's length principle. Ano yung conclusion mo? Na the pricing of the goods ng company is arm's length, no? The transfer pricing documentation for 2008, ito na. Saan nanggagaling yung transfer pricing documentation? Of course, manggagaling yan sa taxpayer, no? At sinong gumagawa niyan? The transfer pricing analyst. As transfer pricing documentation for 2008 states that the group as a whole has a turnover with generic product of Danish krone 7.6 billion. No, yan na yung income niya. US dollars and an income of 1 billion US dollars. The annual accounts for the same year show a net turnover of Danish krone 806.4 million Danish krone and a profit before tax of 145.9 million. In the transfer pricing documentation, as in the documentation concerning 2006-2007, it is stated that A is exposed to increasing competition. Kasi, di ba sabi natin, pag gumagawa ka ng analysis o report, lahat ng environment, operational environment, lahat ng risk ng business, you have to disclose. So, anong sinabi dito sa transfer pricing documentation? A is exposed to increasing competition and that a move from year 1, business year to year 3, business year, had affected the result. Just as the result is affected by a general restructuring of the company. So in 2008, the same method was used in 2006, 2007, and adjustments were also made for goodwill amortizations. Excuse me. Ano doon? Buksan mo yung pinto para may hangin at saka yung ventilador. So, to. Yung pinto na doon, oh. Tsaka ito. Isaksak mo yung ventilador. No? Ganda tong case po na to because ang pinag-uusapan dito, kung ano yung information na nakita doon sa transfer pricing documentation at ginamit ngayon dito as a result ng audit, no? So, i-anticipate natin kung ano man yung magawa natin na transfer pricing documentation as a result of that, gagamitin yun during the transfer pricing audit. Okay. And every year, may transfer pricing documentation, no? So, the transfer pricing documentation for 2008, no? Okay. Under the heading adjustment to the accounting result stated, ito naman yung sinasabi sa adjustment to the accounting result. Ito yung mga disclosures or explanation, no? Kaya very important yung mga disclosures natin. In the annual reports for 2008, amortization of goodwill acquired from G3 has been deducted in the operating margin. However, amortization of acquired goodwill is not an operating expense, and the results accordingly need to be adjusted to be comparable. Remember na yung intro kanina, the goodwill has been depreciated at a flat rate or a flat amount of 57.1 million for 16 years, no? Kaya hagip pa siya dito sa 2006 to 2010 kasi 5 years, so pasok pa yung i-disallow na dun sa 6 years. So dun sa 5 years span na yan, di-disallow lahat yung amortization ng goodwill or depreciation, no? So, anong sabi dito? The amortization of acquired goodwill is not an operating expense. and the result accordingly need to be adjusted to be comparable. No? So after the adjustment, A had an operating margin of negative 0.16%, was below the bottom quartile in the benchmark, which is in 2008 was 1.8. No? So ibig sabihin na negative na yung kanyang operating margin, imagine ha, negative na, samantalang yung acceptable na benchmark is 1.8 to 5.27, no? So, hindi na arm's length. Yun na yung magiging conclusion mo doon. Hindi na arm's length yung report ng transfer pricing documentation. So, under the heading market situation is stated, the market situation in 2008 was far worse than anticipated in 2007 when looking at the expected development and put huge pressure on the whole value chain from the manufacturing sales, in the sense that it was impossible to adapt to the new market situation fast enough to avoid losses, no? So, i-relate natin yan dito sa transfer pricing analysis na ginagawa ko for 2020. No? So, you have to disclose also that during the year, the economic situation of the Philippines is worse because of the closure of business operations, no? So, as A responded to the gravity of the situation by taking several steps in order to optimize the business. This included restructuring and relocating the business, and at the same time, letting go of almost half of the employees. With such a significant drop in revenue, it will, however, always have an immediate impact on the financials of the year. So, yung 2008 nila daw is worst, no? Anong nangyari? Almost half of the employees, no? Na natanggal, no? And then there is a significant drop of revenue. Okay. Ito na naman yung transfer pricing documentation for 2009 and 2010. So you can just imagine saan napunta at ano nangyari doon sa transfer pricing documentation that papagawa sa atin at isubmit sa BIR, no? As transfer pricing documentation for 2009 and 2010 states that the group as a whole in 2009 had a net sales of Danish kron 44.3 billion. You can just imagine, no? Large taxpayer ito eh. Large category C, large company, no? Imagine yung sales niya 44.3 billion, no? US dollars and a net income of 10.3 billion US dollars. No? A's annual accounts show a net turnover in 2006 of Danish kron 754.9 million, Danish kron, and a profit before tax of negative 54.3 million. No? Negative. Imagine, sa sales niya na 44.3 billion, negative pa. Net revenue in 2010 amounted to Danish kron 820.6 million. No? Danish kron, and the result before tax 26.7 million. Ito yung 26.7 million. Yung na net income before tax, okay na to. The transfer pricing documentation for 2009 and 2010 also states that A was exposed to fierce competition. Kasi remember, ang binibenta niya generic, no? Generic na drugs. Napakamura lang, pero ang daming competitors. Under the heading economic analysis, the following is stated about goodwill, no? So in the annual reports for 2009 and 2010, amortization of goodwill acquired from the G3 transaction in 2005 has been deducted before reaching the operating margin in the annual accounts. The goodwill in the accounts is relating to the goodwill of the former G3 business, no? G3 acquisition of J5AS. The amortization of accounting goodwill is accordingly not an operating expense as such and is not deductible for tax purposes. As a consequence, it should be excluded from the determination of the profit indicator to be comparable with the result in the benchmark analysis. The necessary accounting adjustment to the financial statements of A 2009 and 2010 are presented below. So, since Ano nangyari doon sa goodwill na yon na napakalaki-laki na na-recognize nila during the acquisition lang yon, no? And you can just imagine na yung acquisition, sino ba yan? Related parties din yan. Imagine they were benefited of 57.1 million a year, no? So, question mark. Okay. The adjusted operating margin is then calculated at 2.32% in 2009 and 9.8% in 2010. In 2009, the adjusted margin was within the benchmark quartiles. No, yung 2009. Whereas it was above the benchmark for 2010. Ang taas naman niya, above pa siya sa benchmark ng 2010. A concluded on the basis of the adjusted margins, the transactions between A and the group companies were in accordance with the arm's length principle. Tumaas na. Overview of adjusted operating margin and benchmark. Adjusted operating margin and benchmark for the individual years are based on the information on the transfer pricing documentation calculated as follows when adjusting for goodwill amortization. So, may metric siya 2006 to 2010, no? So, adjusted operating margin, nag-adjust na siya sa 5 years, no? So, 2006, 3%, 2007, 3.4 to 3%, no? 2006, 7, 2008, negative na siya na 0.16%, 2009, 2.32%, and 2010, 9.8%, no? So, ito yung adjusted operating margin. Lower quartile, 1.8%, no? 1.8%, 1.8, 1.5, 1.5. Yan yung 2016 to 2000. No. Ito yung 2006 to 2010. No? Okay. So, adjusted operating margin for the individual years is without an adjustment for amortization of goodwill calculated as follows. No? So, dito wala siyang adjustment sa goodwill, no? So, 2006, negative 3.49%. 2007, negative 2.17%. 2008, negative 7.23%. 2009, negative 5.23%. And 2010, 2.85%, no? Okay. So, decision of the tax authorities, ano yung naging decision niya dito? On September 26, 2012, SCAT or the Danish Tax Authority decided that it was unjustified to adjust the operating margin by disregarding amortization of goodwill in the comparability analysis in the company's transfer pricing documentation. As far as 2006 is concerned, SCAT also found it unjustified that A had deducted 10 million Danish krone and Danish krone for integration of new IT system out of the transfer pricing accounts. No? So, SCAT therefore reversed the aforementioned amounts and subsequently found that the company's earnings, when no adjustment was made for amortization of goodwill and integration of new IT system, were outside the arm's length intervals in the company's own benchmark. So, on the basis, SCAT concluded that the calculations documented that the internal prices had not been in accordance with the arm's length principle. No? So, siya na mismo ang nagsabi, yung Danish Tax Authority, that the documented internal prices had not been in accordance with the arm's length principle. Okay. So, therefore, SCAT as A's and B's increased their income by Danish krone 67,101,000 for the income year 2006 and 57,101,000 for the individual income year 2007-2010. A and B appealed against the decision, and on December 2016, the National Tax Court made the decision with the following content. Okay. Anong oras na?
1 hour 59.
Okay. So, tapusin lang natin tong adjusting na amortization na kasi hindi natin ito matatapos. We will continue next time, no? Kasi bakit? Napakaganda ng explanations dito sa um, transfer pricing documentation, no? So, following a review of the company's transfer pricing documentation, Scott increased the company's taxable income in 2006 by 67,101,000 Danish krone, in 2007 by Danish krone 57,101,000 in 2008, by Danish krone 57,101,000 in 2009, and by Danish krone 57,101,000, no? And in 2010, with Danish krone 57,101,000, no? So, yun lang yung kanilang dinisallow, yung goodwill charged to operating expense. No? Okay, so 2010 with Danish krone 57,101,000. So, yun ang disallowance or yung adjustment. So, in its transfer pricing documentation above, the company has made various adjustments in relation to the cost that are included in the operating margin annual report. Scott has approved regulations of OECD's guidelines, section 11.2.8 in 2006, of a total of 89,925,000 in 2007, of a total of Danish krone 40 million, and in 2008, a total of Danish krone 44,216,000. No? However, Scott has not approved regulations regarding amortization of goodwill corresponding to Danish krone 57,101,000 per share. No? So, income year and for 2006, also no cost for integration of IT corresponding to Danish krone 10 million. No? Imagine yung integration ng IT is 10 million because yung IT talaga is ginagamit nila sa kanilang sales, no? And, marketing. And considering that they have generated 4 billion, no, na sales. However, Scott has not approved regulations regarding amortization of goodwill corresponding to 57 Danish krone. No? As the result changed, as a result fell outside the stated benchmark ranges, the transfer pricing documentation, in order to bring the results in line with these ranges, earnings are increased corresponding to amortization of goodwill or by 57,101,000 Danish krone per share year, and for 2006 as well as cost for integration of IT or with Danish krone 10 million, whereby the results are brought in accordance with the arm's length level. No? So the interquartile range according to transfer pricing documentation is for 2006-2008, no? 1.80% minus 5.27%, and the median is 3.5% for 2009, no? 1.55% to 7.49%, and the median is 3.77%. And for 2010, 1.55% to 7.49%, and the median is 3.77%. Yan yung ginawa mo, Hari, na matrix. Di ba? May total and then may average. No? So, pag in-interpret mo yon, kung pasok na arm's length principle, dapat papasok yung percentage nung tested party mo doon sa range. No? So, after adjusting for amortization of goodwill and for 2006, also for cost for integration of IT, the adjusted result can be calculated as follows. No? So, adjusted margin percentage, median, and benchmarks. No? Ito yung presented 2006 to 2010. No? So, nandyan yung mga percentages. Nandyan yung average. No? Okay. So, after increasing the adjusted results corresponding to amortization of goodwill or by Dennis Kron, 57,101,000 per year, and for 2006, also regarding cost for integration of IT or with Dennis Kron, 10 million, the result look like this, no? Ito na, nag-adjust na sila. Okay. So, yung median and benchmark nila, the same lang, no? Average pa iba-iba. Okay. Adjusted margin, increase. Newly adjusted margin, no? From 26.5 to 32.5. Okay. Okay. So, adjusted margin percentage, 3.67%. Median and benchmark, 3.68%. No? So in its case presentation, Scott has referred to Tax Assessment Act Section 2, Arm's Length Principle. No? So yun yung basis niya. The Tax Control Act, Section 3B, the duty to provide information and documentation. Section 5, Paragraph 3, Dictionary Employment. No? State Act, Tax Act, Section 4, Section 42, 43 of the Dennis Financial Statement Act, no? Kita mo yung financial statement nila, may act din, may law. So, more about the basis for the increase of Scott's statement of May 8, 2013 and submission of 1 October 2013 and 18 December 2013. Based on the company's own transfer pricing documentation, Scott has, based on the method that the company itself has chosen and based on the benchmark that the company itself has prepared, a correction has been made that ensures that the company reaches the arm's length level stated in the transfer pricing documentation. Okay. So, Scott has thus not disregarded the transfer pricing documentation, no, that the company itself has prepared. No, so ginamit talaga ng tax authority yung transfer pricing documentation that the company prepared. Scott is based on the method that the company itself has chosen but does not agree that comparability is increased by the corrections that the company has made in order to bring the company's result up to an arm's length level. No? So, Scott correction correspond to the average median in the company's benchmark for the period 2006-2010 above. This shows that the average median in the company's benchmark for the period is 3.68% and the adjusted margin is 3.67%. Furthermore, as alleged by the company, Scott has not disregarded Scott's burden of proof. No? Scott, on the other hand, has reported on how Scott, on the basis of the material that Scott has received from the company, has implemented the increase in question. Scott must admit that the reference to the Tax Control Act, Section 3B, Subsection 8 and Section 5, Paragraph 3, in this connection may seem confusing, but Scott has carefully explained the basis for how the increase has been implemented. No? So, next time, no, our discussion will begin here in the K ratio analysis and basis for companies. No? Okay. And also, we will tackle the amortization of goodwill. No? Then the IT cost. No? Okay. So, with that, I would like to say thank you. Ilan na yung ating subscribers, Sari?
668.
We have 668 na subscribers and ilan pa yung viewers natin ngayon?
Viewers natin ay 7.
Okay. So, with that, I would like to say thank you po sa ating mga viewers, no? So, we will continue with this the next time. And then I would like to reiterate, no? Say thank you talaga sa ating mga subscribers and let's call it a night. Thank you very much.